This is the Baltimore Sports Pub. Here's Terry Ford, Brent Harris, and Alex Woodward.
Welcome in for a Thirsty Thursday here on the pub, October 15th. Today on the show, the Ravens need someone else to step up on offense. Where will Le'Veon Bell end up signing? And Baltimore sportscasting legend Keith Mills joins us for Happy Hour. Let's start with the recently released Le'Veon Bell. He is now looking for a new team, and according to sources, he has narrowed his options down to either the Dolphins, the Bills, or the Chiefs. Great. They need more weapons,
need more.
don't
They need more.
Perfect. Yeah. Brent Harris, where do you think Le'Veon Bell eventually signs?
Shocking. The Steelers weren't on that list. Are you telling me the Pittsburgh Steelers didn't make the final cut for Le'Veon Bell? By the way, the Jets had to pay like $8+ million just to get rid of him. Yeah. I don't know what that says about Le'Veon Bell, whether it's the player in the locker room or the player on the field. And I know the Jets are going in a different direction and in the wrong direction, but it is worth noting that Le'Veon Bell didn't play, I think, 3 games this year, 3 or 4 games. He's been hurt. He's only got a dozen or so touches. I mean, he hasn't done anything this year, so I'm not sure what you're getting for whoever it is that ends up picking him up. But the Chiefs probably would be the front runner. If you're Le'Veon Bell, wouldn't you want to go to a team that could win the Super Bowl? And I think the Chiefs are right at the bottom, near the bottom in rushing this year. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been awesome. He averages just over 4 yards a carry, but he's dynamic in open space. I don't know he's a workhorse kind of running back, so maybe they could use a Le'Veon Bell to split those carries. But if you're Le'Veon Bell, isn't that a pretty Dolphins or Chiefs? Dolphins or Chiefs?
Big story today. Ravens are 4-1 through the first 5 weeks of the season, but here we are, still nitpicking on what they can improve on. Over the last 3 games, Lamar Jackson has targeted Mark Andrews and Hollywood Brown on half of his 86 attempts. And for the season, they have accounted for 45% of the Ravens' total receptions. Terry Ford, they obviously need someone else in the mix on offense. Who do you think will be the one to step up?
I'm thinking Brashard Perriman. Oh, he's not there anymore. My bad. Brain fart. Now, look, I like Devin Duvernay. I know he's a rookie, and I know rookie wide receivers have a ton of mental stuff you have to learn in regards to playing in the NFL, reading coverage, being on the same page with your quarterback, learning the route tree. I get all that. But let's look at the choices here. Miles Boykin, again, is he going to be one of those guys, fellas, we see? The Ravens always have the wide receivers who are heroes in August, who can't get it done once the games start for real. Is Miles Boykin that guy? Because it feels like he's heading down that road. I mean, Boykin hasn't really stepped up or has had that improvement from year 1 to year 2 in regards to him running a route tree and recognizing coverages. I don't know. I just don't know about Boykin. I think Duvernay brings something a little bit we've seen of him. It feels like, he's got speed, he's got explosiveness, he's got athleticism. It feels like you find ways to get him the ball, Brent, whether it's crossers, little bubble screens, routes that he can run right now. I feel like you get Devin Duvernay the ball, maybe some end arounds or something. I feel like he's got the potential to be able to make some big chunk plays for you. I've got more confidence in Duvernay than I do Boykin. I think Prochet is he's a little bit behind those guys. So, and don't get me wrong, Boykin's been open a couple of times deep and Lamar's missed him. So it's not like Boykin hasn't done anything. But it feels like I'd rather get the ball to Duvernay and just see what he can do when he's got it in his hands, because I feel like he can do stuff. Boykin just feels like a one-trick pony to me, and he doesn't feel like he's learning at the rate you hope he would. I'd go with Duvernay right now, man, if I'm trying to pick a guy.
And I agree with everything you just said. And you talk about as a rookie, you've got to get used to the speed of the game. Well, it's not an issue for Duvernay.
No,
that's an issue for the defenses.
Right.
Duvernay's speed is something that defenses are going to have to deal with. And I do kind of want to point this out. I wonder how much the fact that Ravens only have 2 tight ends on the roster, how much that hurts Mark Andrews. I think it could be an issue. When you had Hayden Hurst, another weapon that could catch the football, I think defenses are keying, not only because Mark Andrews had a great year last year and he's a big-time threat, but I think because the Ravens don't have a lot of other options. And as you look and say, okay, who could the Ravens go to offensively, that list is pretty short, isn't it? I mean, we got to Devin Duvernay, who is a rookie, partly because we like what we've seen so far, very limited, but at the same time, there's not a long list.
It's Happy Hour on Baltimore Sports Pub. Now joining Alex, Terry, and Brent, it's...
And let's welcome in a long-time Baltimore sports broadcaster and a good friend of ours here on Baltimore Sports Pub, Keith Mills. And Mills, great to see you.
Oh, guys, great to be here, man. Looking forward to it. Missed you.
Tell me how semi-retirement is. I mean,
semi-retirement. I highly recommend it.
You left the full-time gig at BAL, but you're still pretty busy.
Oh, yeah. Not that busy. All I do now is this time of year, I do the Ravens pregame and postgame for BAL. Do a TV show on Sunday nights with Pete Gilbert after the Sunday night game on the Ravens, and I do Navy football, and that's it, man. In the spring, I'm out of here, brother. I'm back down in Florida. Going back down Monday for a couple of days.
That's living. Hey, Mills, you got a guest house or like a shed you can put me up in?
We've got some room.
Yeah,
we got some room, yeah. Come on down.
I'll mow the lawn for you. Yeah, I'm here, man. I'll do something to earn my keep.
Terry, it's funny. I told a friend of mine, I said, just get down there and you got a place to stay. Well, one day he just showed up and there he was. Okay, I guess you're going to stay there.
And then you're like going, damn, I wasn't really serious. He won't go anywhere.
Right.
Hey, Keith, you like we did, we watched Vince Bagley all when we were growing up, and we all Channel 11, we're watching Vince, and Vince was he was the guy. And we all watched as we were kids. And a lot of us said, well, I want to be a sportscaster like Vince Bagley, or I want to do sports something like Vince Bagley. Give me your thoughts. I mean, you knew him. Give us some Vince Bagley memories and thoughts real quick, friend.
Man, how much time you got? Yeah. You're right, Terry. He showed us all the way in Baltimore. This is not New York, Philly, Chicago, LA, the big markets. This is Baltimore. And he was the first person I ever saw. Remember laying in bed, man, like a 10th grader in high school, black and white TV. And he would show the high schools. It wasn't just Loyola Calvert Hall and Turkey Day and City Poly, man. It was like, it was Dunbar basketball, and it was, Mount St. Joe baseball. It was every sport, girls, boys. Girls weren't as big as they are now. And I thought, man, that's really cool. Here's a guy. And I didn't know him, but my father knew him really well. My father worked at Channel 13 for 40 years, and he used to televise all the Colts games and all the Orioles games. So he got to know Vince really well. Vince, John Stedman, and Chuck Thompson and those guys. And Vince was exactly like he was on TV, off of TV. Last Vince story real quick. I remember asking him, Scott Garceau and I were walking around Memorial Stadium one day, and again, people were coming up to him. I mean, grandmothers and high school athletes and, the ushers, and everybody was coming up to him. And he was so gracious and so humble and so nice. And I asked him, I said, how do you do it? How do you treat everybody like they're the most important person in the room? He goes, two things. One, and I like people, they're just really good, and two, if they're watching or listening, it means, or whether they're critical or complimentary, I don't know anybody was critical of them, they're watching or listening, and you really have to respect that. So that's what I remember about Vince.
Hey, Keith, one thing I remember too is, I just started at Fox 45. I'm at a Ravens game and having lunch before the game, and Vince just comes up to the table, asks if he can sit down. Of course, I jump up and pull the seat out for him. I mean, he's the dean of sports, and like you, I grew up watching him. And he sat there for 45 minutes asking about the job, the family, had said that, hey, look, I really like watching you. It's been a lot of fun. You're doing a great job. And here I am, mid-20s, and I'm going, are you serious? It's Vince Bagley. And that's just how he was. He was always so genuine and gracious. And that story is like everybody else. They all experienced the same thing with Vince. He was a very giving and kind person. And, I think I'll miss that. I'll miss going to a Ravens game and seeing him in the press box.
Oh, no question.
He retired years ago, but he was still around.
Still around. It was funny, Brent, when he came into Camden Yards or M&T Bank, all of it. I mean us, you, me, Scott, Jerry, Bruce Cunningham, Brett Hollander, everybody gathered around. Kenny Wyman, Terry, if you were there, I'm sure you were with us as well. And just to listen to Vince, man, and just soak up some of his stories and his pearl of wisdom. But he loved all of us, everybody that came after him. We were one of his kids, man, no question about it. He had a stable full of young guys that loved him, and he understood that.
You know what's funny, really quick, is you talk about this. When I was in school, right? They tell you in school, go meet everybody, go meet all the sportscasters, all these, go talk to everybody, say hi, be a pain in the ass. I said, go do it. And Vince Bagley and Chuck Thompson were the two guys. I walked up to them and the same thing happened. I'll never forget it. They both go, all right, kid, I got like 2 or 3 minutes, but I'll talk to you. 30, 40 minutes later, they're still talking to me.
Right.
And it's just like, that's just who they were, man. They were just real. They were down to earth. And a lot of guys in our business, and you fellows know this, they don't want to tell you anything when you're starting. Because, they want to, they feel insecure about everything. Those two guys, Vince Bagley, Chuck Thompson would sit there and tell you what to do, how to do it, and they were fabulous to talk to when you're just starting because they were very giving and very open, and they loved what they were doing. And they weren't
threatened.
No,
Terry, they weren't threatened by anybody. They had no ego. They weren't threatened by you and I or anybody. They were just, they loved what they do. I tell you what, my first job in the media was actually at the News American. John Stedman hired me right out of high school. My father knew him. And I would work on Saturday nights, and I would, run race results upstairs to get set and help out with high schools. Eventually, covered some high school sports. But John would always come in on Saturday nights, and him and Vince were like brothers, like Chuck as well. And Vince would come in maybe once every 4 Saturdays, and it would be Jack Gibbons and Mike Marlowe, myself, Frank Lynch, and man, I'm telling you, you talk about an education at the lap of greatness. I mean, they knew everybody. They dropped more names in 30 seconds than I even knew of, and it was just priceless, man. And they never were threatened by anybody.
Yeah.
Baltimore's been so lucky to have, we're blessed with so many great sportscasters, and it feels like he's had a big impact on you and Scott Garceau. I don't know you personally, but I worked with Scott for many years, and the things that you described about Vince Bagley, that's Scott Garceau. And when we had you on, when you announced your retirement, everyone that called in talking about you said the same thing. Hey, Keith talks to me about my kid's high school basketball game, and we're talking for half an hour at a Buffalo Wild Wings. I mean, that's just kind of the types of people that are working in Baltimore, and we're blessed to have that because like you said, not everybody in this business wants to be friendly, wants to talk to the people. They're just there to get a check and leave. Not you guys. But the check is important too. But,
it's now. Hey, let me tell you what, it is now. It really is now. Those checks that came in years ago are really important now.
So as you know, fans here in Baltimore are never happy. Ravens are 4-1. Obviously, they're not going to live up to the running game of last year, historic pace. But after 5 weeks, do you find yourself frustrated like much of the fan base with the offensive game plan, or do you see it more as like a feeling out period since they didn't really have a preseason?
Great question. I think it's multiple answers to that. One, you're exactly right. To think that they're going to reproduce what they did last year from an offensive standpoint, particularly a running game standpoint, is just unrealistic. Two, and it's getting some tread right now after week 4 or after week 5, but Marshall Yanda not being there. And everybody said when he was retired, you can't replace Marshall Yanda. And then you think you can plug in a rookie and Tyree Phillips, and then last week Ben Powers and Pat McCarty and have that same production. Well, that is also unrealistic. Mark Ingram said yesterday Marshall was playing last year at the highest level of an offensive lineman he'd ever seen. And he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. You're not going to be as good without Marshall Yanda there. They've had some injuries up front, Matt Skura and Ronnie Stanley. That's added to it. The other part of it, I don't think gets enough tread, is the fact that these defensive coordinators now have had a whole year to watch what Lamar was doing and then a whole 6 months to study what he was doing and try to defend it. And Femi Adebayo, who does color analyst for our broadcast on WBAL, brought up a great point. Week 1, first drive of the game. He goes, the Browns are spreading out their corners and they're stacking the box and they're taking away the run and they're taking away Lamar's outside run. So now it's up to the Ravens to find a way to beat them with the intermediate pass, try to break a run here or two, try to get outside with the running backs and not Lamar and do some things that way. And I asked Femi the other day on the air, I said, are they still doing it? He goes, absolutely. Everybody's still doing it. The Bengals crashed 2 cornerbacks every time Lamar went wide. Every time, the 3-4 times he went wide, Darius Phillips and William Jackson crashed hard and forced him to either run to the sideline and try to beat him around the edge or throw the ball away. So their game plan is now kind of well known. It's going to be interesting to see how the Ravens deal with that. But to answer your question, a little frustrating because they've let some plays on the field in the passing game Lamar's missed Hollywood downfield 3 or 4 times. Mark Andrews dropped a touchdown in the end zone against the Chiefs. He dropped another ball in that game as well. So when they're giving you the plays down the field, you got to make them. And, man, instead of maybe losing to the Chiefs, you're in the game. And instead of winning 30-17 or whatever it was last week, 27-3, you win 44-10, and everybody's happy.
Keith,
So,
let me ask you about Navy football, because you're on the sidelines for Navy football. It's an odd time, obviously, with COVID. I know you guys have to do the broadcast from when they're on the road, but you're at the stadium there in Annapolis. As far as the midshipmen, they've got they're 2-2, 2 blowout losses and 2 close wins. What do you make of Ken Niumatalolo's team this year, and how good can they be down the stretch here?
That's a great question. Coaching staff's asking the same thing because they have been so up and down. Again, you lose Malcolm Perry, who's playing with the Miami Dolphins, and even though he wasn't a great passing quarterback, he was a tremendous triple option quarterback for what they try to do. You give him a seam, and he is gone. Well, that same seam, these kids that are quarterbacking now, no disrespect to Dalen Morris and Tiger Goslin, they're hitting the seam, and they're getting 4 or 5 yards instead of 35 to 40. So that's a big difference. Their offensive line lost 3 really, really good players, 2 all-conference players, in Ford Higgins and Kendall Wright. So you're going to take a step back right there, and it took them a while to get some kind of physicality up front. Their defense lost some key players. So to answer your question, plus the fact they didn't have a chance to hit at all in summer practice, the superintendent and the health people at the academy would not let them have any contact at all. And that BYU game, I was actually down right behind the sideline. And I mean, it was men amongst boys. Last week, they played as well as they have all year in terms of speed, intensity, and just aggressiveness at the point of attack, the offensive and defensive line. So I think they're looking to finish strong in the next 5 or 6 weeks. But they got some tough games. East Carolina, they've done well against, but Houston and some of these other teams in the league, man, they're really good.
Hey, Mills, before I let you go, and I had 10 other questions, and they're gone. So talking to you, something else hit me. I got something better now. That other stuff was lame. It was my kids wrote it anyway. So your father worked locally in news, and you were TV. You did TV sports. Brent's done TV sports. Alex and I have watched TV sports. But what is give me your thoughts on the shrinking of the time you get on a local sportscast at 11 o'clock to do this to the locals. I think that's a huge mistake that's being done around the country. They're taking away local sports from newscasts, saying, oh, people get it from the internet or from here or there. I think it still matters to have a good local sportscast, at least at 11 o'clock, Millsy, to talk about what's going on in your town. Because at the end of the day, we all care about what's going on in our town.
No question about it, Terry. I agree 300%. And Brent and I share this philosophy. Local sports, it's got to be local, though.
Yes.
You got to go out. You got to do the high schools. You got to do the local colleges. You got to tell stories about the athletes in your town. And people will watch. Yep. They watch with Vince. They watch with Scott and I. They certainly watch with Brent and Bruce when they were together. They'll watch, but you gotta give them the time to do it, and you got to make it local. So, having 30 seconds of a local, whatever, a reader of someone that did something well isn't my version. And I don't think yours is too, of a local sportscast. If you devote the time and if you give the resources to the guys on the air to go out and shoot games and go into the schools and talk to the kids, learn about them. We used to do a scholar athlete thing every week for 20 years. And it took off. And that was Vince Bagley's influence on us. So I agree with you 100%. Missing the boat. They are missing the boat dearly on the local sports connection in Baltimore. And again, Baltimore's not New York, Chicago, LA, which has got 300,000 pro sports. Baltimore's got 2 and 3 counting the Blast. And high school, you guys been to high school games, man. You go to a Dunbar, Lake Clifton basketball game, and there's 3,000 people in the stands. And tell me they don't care about what's going on,
That takes me back to a lecture, I think, Keith, it was 93, 94, somewhere there.
Oh, yes.
Keith Mills was Professor Mills back in the day, guys. He was actually my professor at Towson. So I learned from one of the best.
Professor's a stretch, by the way. I was there. I wasn't a professor.
Now, you'd also taught keg stands at Towson, right?
I did.
Keg stands?
Well, I didn't teach him, but I watched as the other kids did it.
He studied.
But Brett, going back to that class, you, Preston Mitchum, I mean, that class, there's 3 or 4 guys working for Masson right now that are on their production crew. The greatest assemblage of young talent I've ever been around in Baltimore was your class. But I don't know if you remember this. I had a conversation with you guys about what worked in Baltimore. And I said, here's what works in Baltimore. Vince Bagley. That's what works in Baltimore. Go back and try to find some tape of Vince if you're not familiar with him. You guys know who he was. He is the dean for a reason. He knows the names of every grandfather, father, and son and daughter who's ever played a game in high school sports in Baltimore. That was his legacy.
You know what's cool about Vince too? He's kind of like the Terry Ford of today. He never used a teleprompter. He never
Absolutely.
had his sportscast scripted out. He could talk like Terry can for hours and hours and deliver a great speech.
Guys, the difference is I can't read. See, Vince could read. He just didn't use it. I can't read.
Was down in Girls used to train in Miami. Vince had this little index card, and he had like 70 lines on this little index card. And he's doing a live shot from Miami Stadium, which was not in the greatest part of town. And it's right outside, and all these guys are coming up asking for the money and everything during the show and this and that. And I was working at Channel 13 at the time as a sports person, and I'm watching. And I'm marveling at his ability to hold off all the neighborhood kids who wanted like 50 cents, talk about, Eddie and Cal's batting practice, have Q&A with Rudy Miller at the time back in Baltimore, and reading the 70 lines, which were about this big of copy. And I said, how do you do it, man? And when he was done, how do you do it? He goes, it's all up here. I just write down the notes just in case I get distracted.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
It's just Bagley, man.
Keith, we appreciate you spending a few minutes with us. Always great to catch up, Millsy.
Always a pleasure, buddy. You got it, guys. Anytime.
Thanks,
All
Keith.
right, thank you, brother. We'll see you, man.